Hello, everyone. I'm Mitch Wagner, Chief Analyst for Cloud, Data Center, Infrastructure, and AI for Fierce Network Research. We're here today to talk about data infrastructure and storage for AI, and we're also going to talk about the role of open source for all of that for telco operators. We have two great speakers to discuss this subject with you today. We have Andrew Douglas, who is Pure Storage Senior Director for Telco Vertical, and we also have Honoré Labordette, Vice President for Red Hat Telco, Media, Entertainment, and Edge Ecosystems. Welcome, Andrew and Honoré. Andrew, how do you see AI transforming the telco industry's approach to data infrastructure?
I see it as one of their kind of core missions at the moment. To be honest, I mean, if we look at data and the way that operators treat data, it's an interesting dynamic because data is at the heart of everything. It really is the nucleus of everything an operator does. It's also its secret sauce, the data it keeps, the data it manages. But I think the interesting dynamic is with that. If you look at the industry over the years, ultimately, storage specifically, whether that be hardware or even software as well, it's at times it's treated as a commodity. And I think for many years, data and storage in that commodity landscape, it's treated as a race to the bottom. It's a very procurement-led, heavy activity. And whilst we understand that, that's an important framework to have. As I said a moment ago, the reality is data is so important, and specifically in AI, as we start to move towards understanding and being able to provide these very intense data pipelines. And you asked the question in some ways is, with the data investments that you've been making over the years with different providers, with different speeds, with different levels of legacy, with many different vendors in that mix. Is that type of legacy complexity and legacy debt, is that really what's going to propagate you further to be able to run quite high performant, quite stringent data pipelines to feed these AI, very heavy, thirsty applications? It's probably not. So I really see a shift and a change in that, which is great certainly from a pure storage perspective, where data is really propagated to the top of the key initiatives. What you'll see, I believe, and we are starting to already see that, which you'll see operators and procurement and IT teams investing in.
Honoré, what are the key challenges telcos face as they build unified, high-velocity data pipelines that enable AI at the edge and at the core?
Telcos face the challenge of unifying highly fragmented data that's spread across OSS, BSS, RAN, and transport systems. They have to handle massive volumes of data that arrive at high velocity and require scalability and cloud-native pipelines. There's strict latency demands, especially for AI, that make it difficult to balance real-time processing with centralized analytics. I think also that the legacy infrastructure often resists integration with modern streaming and AI framework, which ultimately will slow down transformation. Then there are the governance and compliance rules, such as GDPR, and these will add complexity to how data is shared, stored, and processed across these borders. These pipelines must be secure end-to-end with strong encryption, access control, and anonymization where required. Interoperability also remains a hurdle with a mix of open source tools, hyperscaler solutions, and vendor-specific platforms. Ultimately, telcos must overcome these issues to deliver fast, trusted, and consistent data pipelines that power AI everywhere.
Very interesting. Thank you, Honoré. So, Andrew, next question is for you. What trends in telco data infrastructure and AI are you most excited about right now?
I would say the first trend and the big trend for me is in investments, right? We're now starting to see the true investments in this space, not just from a kind of conversation but to physically, huge projects and huge swathes of the likes of Pure and Red Hat, who are working very close on these types of solutions together, and it happens across the industry. So real investments is really exciting. We were, for the last couple of years, I'm sure Honoré's probably the same last couple of years at these big events that you would go to and the customers that you would speak to, you were always trying to find a way of how could I crowbar AI into a conversation. You don't need to crowbar anymore, really, because it's right at the front and center of what operators are now truly able to invest in, because of providers like ourselves are putting the much needed R&D into the space, and also opening the ecosystem to work together, because that's really what's required. It's a sum of all the parts. It's not an individual story. So that's really exciting. The last 2 years, the curve of investment and the curve of things actually happening on the ground is just exponential. I'd say there are a couple of areas that operators are certainly focusing in on. The big area is autonomous networks, which I always say sounds like a science fiction movie. It's really not. If you look at what a lot of operators are saying, and the huge network that they have to manage, the tens of thousands of devices and data flowing around, and macro networks and everything else goes on. Are humans, are they really the best people at times to be able to react and operate those networks, even with the modern infrastructure and software that exists today? Or is there an ability to fine tune things and actions to happen in real time? Well, I think operators will probably take the latter, especially where you've got the potential for multi-million pound savings and investments back into a very, very complex network. So autonomous networks, the movie, I think actually is real, and more things are going to come as part of that. We'll see more and more of that. I think the two other areas for me are AI factories. Again, a couple of years ago, you were kind of on the coattails of, well, is this real or not? Well, speaking to customers recently, actually in the Middle East, that are leading the charge in this space. Again, the size and scale of some of these AI factories is incredible. And that leads it on to the third point. Really, is the amount of investment required and the size and scale of this sometimes is quite scary, especially for operators who are always looking at ways to how to improve how they manage their investments, and the investments can be quite large also for enterprises. And we think really with what telcos have today in terms of their own infrastructure and in terms of their ability to provide potentially AI factories out to the enterprise, I think, and how they can monetize it, I think we'll see more and more of that. There's still some work to be done because it's not that easy, and the investment case is still takes a lot of work to get there, but I think we'll see more and more of that.
Next question is Honoré. How do open source and cloud native technologies facilitate democratization of data access across telco organizations?
Open source will increasingly become the foundation of the telco data infrastructure. I believe that we'll see greater adoption of cloud native and open source because of the standardization that it drives across diverse platforms and vendors. And I think the telcos will lean ever more on open source for that interoperability and reducing lock-in with a particular vendor. But I think Andrew makes an important point, and to pivot off of my earlier comments about the telcos and the challenges that they are facing with some of these technologies, I think the partnerships are going to be key to overcoming the challenges and driving the adoption of both open source and cloud native types of technologies. All of this is going to require collaboration between the telcos, the vendors, open source foundations, if we're going to see this expansion and see the acceleration of the innovation focused on these common challenges. And again, to point back to Andrew's comment, which is part of the reason why Red Hat and Pure are partnering in this space. We have an excellent partnership, and we're working very intentionally to help solve some of these problems by bringing our technology together for the customers.
So the next question again is for Andrew. How do you see the role of data infrastructure and storage evolving as telcos continue to adopt cloud native and AI-driven architectures?
I think that it'll keep evolving, certainly in terms of how we look to unify how that data is delivered. We strongly believe at Pure Storage that having multiple different vendors at multiple different stages in their legacy life, with different types of feeds and speeds, and it's really not the type of data platform that's required, certainly for AI infrastructure. As Honore said, and I completely agree, and I mentioned it maybe in a previous answer, is it really is the sum of all the parts for the vendors. We really got to figure out a way, and we are figuring out that way of how we work together, and what is our story as part of that ecosystem, whether it be from the likes of Red Hat, where we work very closely together, especially because of the what Red Hat can do in regards to its orchestration, and it's very, very unique Red Hat in the telco ecosystem because it cross cuts across everything, whether it be IT cloud, whether it be the network, whether it be the RAN, whether it be the core, and that's really, really important because again, when you're looking to solidify the way that you manage data across different application sets within a telco landscape, which is very, very varied and wide. You're looking to maybe actually to manage some of that data and some of those services in a hyperscaler, or certainly I think we'll see more and more. I'm sure anyone will agree with me. More and more towards the edge. That's really going to be a big transformational pivot point for all of the operators over the next 1, 3, 4, 5 years. I think that's really where we'll start to see a lot more of the activity. But I've certainly seen in the last 2 years that I've been at Pure Storage for sure, and last 20 years in the industry. What's the collaboration and partnership through open source technologies and other areas has certainly increased as we all start to figure out how we get to the end prize together, because there's a slice for all of us to work, including the operators. So I really see that as the kind of the big areas.
Now, our next question, final question, is for Honore. How do you envision the role of open source evolving in telco data infrastructure for the next 3 to 5 years?
I think it's going to continue to increase. Open source and cloud native technologies provide this common framework and the APIs that helps to break down the data silos across different telco domains. Because it enables standardization, interoperable platforms that make it easier for teams to share and consume data consistently, I think we're going to continue to see that adoption increase. At some point, I think open source and cloud native will no longer be an option. I think it will be the standardization of what customers are going to look to deploy and look to for scale, and to take advantage of all of the capabilities and benefits that can be offered through some of the AI technology that we're adding to our solutions and that we're working on together with the partnership with Pure. I only see this just continuing to evolve and to progress and to grow. And again, I think it's really important that we work together with these partnerships, because in order to make that happen, each of the different components and each of the different vendors have to come together with the customer success in mind.
That wraps things up. I'd like to thank our speakers, Andrew Douglas from Pure Storage and Honore Le Bordet from Red Hat, and we'll talk to you